This is a nice way to end the day. Again, some of you may have seen these, so you'll perform really well when you refresh your memory on what this is all about. But I'm going to show you, we might have time for the two, we'll see how we go. I'm going to show you a couple of excursions, and I'll give you a lot of photographs of the excursion. And what I would like you to do as you see the photographs is I'd like you to write down on the piece of paper as many positive benefits as you can find. They might be positive benefits to the environment or to local people or to the economy, and write down as many negative impacts, the harm that you see that's done on the environment or local people or the economy. And let's see how many you get. Okay? The first excursion is a Jeep Safari. So this is how it's sold. Spend a day bouncing along jungle tracks and rocky riverbeds, keeping an eye out for wildlife. In this fabulous, unspoilt forest, the jolly sounds of monkeys and parakeets compete with the loud colours of the enormous flowers and the brightly coloured tree frogs. Then after a barbecue at the edge of the trees, we descend to the town along the dry riverbed to top it off with a swim in the man-made freshwater Lido. Wow. Here are some of the photographs. So these were the two jeeps behind the one I was in, and the riverbed wasn't so dry. It had actually got some water in it. I wouldn't say go as far as saying it's missold, because you expect that rivers are going to have water in, don't you? But there we go. These were the jeeps in front. That was interesting. I'm surprised that actually she managed to stay inside the vehicle at times, because it was throwing her all over the place. And we came across this tiger. This guy here was shouting at this tiger because it was just strolling, across the road, and it wasn't the first one that we'd come across. So I think he was trying to sort of chivvy it along a little bit, get it to move out of the way. This, because it had rained, you couldn't actually get up the riverbed down here because this was too deep now. So the jeeps had taken a diversion out of the riverbed over some of the sort of surrounding parkland. This was a herd of elephants. They weren't part of our excursion. They were actually sat there, I think they'd been there for a long time, just watching and observing those elephants. And this was a little pool in the middle of the riverbed, and everybody stopped because all of a sudden some people spotted a few frogs. Of course, they weren't the brightly coloured tree frogs that we were hoping for. These were rather plain frogs in the water, and some of them were a little bit flatter than the ones that you see there. This was a little bit more belligerent, okay, this one. It was very, do you understand the word belligerent?
Yes.
Yes? Obstinate. It wasn't going to move. So rather than take off to the side of this track, it just plodded slowly all the way up the track. And so that's why he's now sort of, I don't know why he thought that the tiger could see him waving his arms around, but there we go. There was one of the monkeys, very interested to watch us. It was the only one we saw, sadly. One of the parrots. Most of the parrots were flying out of the trees as we passed. There's the barbecue. It was very hot that afternoon, so rather than put it out on the edge of the trees, they brought it underneath the canopy of the trees for a little bit of shade. But very, very tasty it was. And then we finished off with this swim in this freshwater Lido, and there were 3 levels. These are infinity pools, and you can see beautiful fresh water on 3 levels, built in this sort of forest clearing. The village, you can just make out the town. It's just there, just on the top of the screen. So, what did we get? Okay, let's concentrate on the negatives. Okay? What do we think were the harmful impacts of that excursion? What have you got?
Biodiversity.
One over there.
I think the vehicle is a polluting vehicle, so
Okay.
that's one thing. And it's not only polluting the air, but also the water.
Okay.
And for biodiversity.
Just one thing. Okay. So you've got polluting. Okay. It could be burning fossil fuels, and it's in the water, so we could have some exhaust and chemicals or whatever going into the water. Could be leaking oil, brake fluid, all sorts of things. Good. Like that one. Well done.
It's a biodiversity.
Barbecue under the trees.
Barbecue under the trees. What's the issue?
Well, the smoke is all around the trees, so.
Okay, so that smoke's going to go up in the canopy of the trees, and it's going to have an impact on anything that's living up there in the canopy of the trees. Good. There's also a fire risk.
Yes. Also for the animals.
Yeah.
Well,
And for the animals, harmful to the animals. Good. Another negative.
The noise level seems high because of the vehicles and because of the guys shouting.
So we could be disturbing the wildlife. That's probably why the parrots are all flying out of the trees, to be honest, because of the noise. Okay? Whether or not the other animals were affected that much by it, the tiger didn't seem to be batting an eyelid, but I think the tiger has probably got used to it, and that's not a natural thing either, so that's not so good. Another negative.
The biodiversity negative impact.
Could be, very much so, because especially if the vehicles are going off track, which happens several times, you don't know what it's driving over, and certainly the frogs are getting squashed in that little pool. Okay? So a big impact on biodiversity. Any other negatives?
Use of water.
Yeah? Could be a big abuse of water.
Yeah.
Where's the fresh water coming from?
Yeah.
Dry river.
Could be the dry river, could be. That might be why there's no water there. It could be that...
But probably not.
Well, the chemicals in the river, in the swimming pool, could be polluting the local area because they're going to have to be backwashing it. They're going to have to be changing the water. Is that going to drain away anywhere in the middle of a forest? Probably not. It's just going on the forest floor. So what's the impact to biodiversity then from all of that? Okay, what about some positives?
Local people.
Local economy, local people, good. We've got drivers who might be employed, we've got guides who might be employed, people running the barbecue, people, we might be going through a national park, so there's people maintaining that we might be contributing to. Good, another one.
Perhaps raising awareness for protection of the animals if it's done by the guides.
If it's done by the guides, so it could be about learning about the animals and conservation efforts. Yeah? Very good, positive. Excellent. Another one.
Local food used for barbecue.
Absolutely. Could be local pork sausages that are being used on the barbecue, and you could be telling a story about those as well, so there could be a way of trying to bring in the sort of the community element into it. Good. There might be some sustainable use of fuel as well. It could be that those vehicles were quite efficient. It could be the barbecue was using sustainable charcoal. It could be a whole host of things, and we don't know unless we do the investigation. So let's see what else is on the list. We might have come up with all of these. Local food, educated tourists. Yeah, we've got all that. Income for a wildlife reserve. That might be possible. Negatives. Presence of people damaging to the wildlife, fire hazard we got, where's the water coming from, we got that, could be imported food, there could be little or no contribution to the local economy, except because we don't know whether or not these were local guides, we just have to assume. Could be using fossil fuels. So you see there's lots of things to weigh up in this excursion, positives and negatives. And it's a really good thing to do, is to take a step back from your business and identify something you do a lot of as an activity and do that exercise. You either do it from memory or you physically go and do it. You've got a tour like this, for instance, or an excursion that you're offering, you can go and do it and write down all the way through all the positives and negatives. And wherever there's a question mark, then you've got some digging to do to find out the truth. Because you've got to look for the evidence that will allow you to say whether this excursion is a sustainable one or not. And the idea is that we want to try and do something to eliminate all of that, but increase all of that. And this is about impact assessment and impact management. And this is key to becoming a sustainable business. So just using that as an idea, you can take that and carry it through most of the business. I do have another one, which we don't have time to do really. It's a water park. So this again can be inherently quite an unsustainable practice because of the amount of water. But you know, that's a fleet of taxis. Could have gone by bus. However, as a compensatory feature, I know that these taxis are all hybrid cars. And actually, they are very environmentally friendly vehicles. It's a German fleet of vehicles, these. Of course, you've got all these rides, lots of water coming down. There's nobody in here, but there's still lots of water coming down, so lots of energy pushing it all down.
And they use so many plastic.
Lots of plastics, yeah, lots of materials. What's the manufacturing process looking like to create all this? How often does it need to be replaced? What's its maintenance regime? Look at all the energy required to push water around in this park.
Destructing the environment to make
Well,
it.
yeah, it could well be that you've deforested an area in order to create a space to put this there. There's some balancing effects. You could say that you're keeping people in a confined space. That works for this. And you could be teaching people to appreciate water and learn how to swim. That could be a positive side to this. Water, of course, when you do this sort of thing with it, evaporates, and it evaporates quite rapidly. So you have to replace water constantly in these sorts of places because it disappears into the atmosphere. Jacuzzi, well, how much energy is required for that? When those ladies climb out, does that get switched off? Or does it just keep running, ready for the next people to come in? Don't know, we'd have to do some investigation. It'd be nice to see that there was a button or something on one of these. There was a timer switch, possibly.
The temperature of the water.
Yeah, or possibly.
But
Whatever.
in a very economical way. There are a lot of them inside.
Well, yeah. I think you should stop there. So, oh wow. Now, of course, again, people could be learning to swim, but there's an inherent danger here in that should anybody get into difficulty in the water, then they could go unnoticed. And if there was somebody lying on the bottom that had actually gone under the water, it'd be very difficult to see them. So the risk of accident here, or even death, is quite high, which is why in water parks generally you have a very high ratio of supervisors or lifeguards to customers. That means that you're a big employer, so it could be a very big contribution to the local economy. Okay? Again, lots more plastic, nice, exciting, but infrastructure very heavy on materials and pollution and energy. Some of these things take a lot of energy to create a wave that's sufficient to actually surf along. It's a lot of energy to push water, and you have to then pull all that water back into a holding tank and ready to push it out again. There's huge demand on energy with a water park like this. Some rides are not very popular. You know, this sort of thing, you just very sedately just slide down here and slop out at the bottom. They don't attract a lot of people, but you're still moving lots of water around, you're putting lots of chemicals in the water.
And the mountain is not natural.
It's not very natural, but I suppose that's the entertainment factor of a theme park.
No, but it's impact of the environment.
Yes. This, of course, also might be heated, so there could be some energy issue there if it's in a place where you've got cold climate but you still want to run it all year round. Think about, you know, what opportunities are there to purchase food and possibly beverages? And does, you know, Bennigan's is a pub, a bar. Is that compatible with water and swimming and, you know, the inherent dangers in mixing alcohol and water-based activities? So you've got to be thinking about that. How many of these very internationally known brands are bringing in their own labour? How many of them are bringing in imported food? We don't know until we investigate. So some big issues there. Are we thinking about the safety of clients? These people could be just burning themselves. I would imagine there's a lot of red lobster looking like bodies at the end of the day. Are they protecting themselves? Well, again, very nice, but is it a natural environment? You know, what's the cost of doing all of this? Not financial, but environmental cost in creating all of this. Where are all these coming from? Is this in the ocean? No, actually it wasn't in this water park, it's an artificial environment. So where they're sourcing all of the stock, can they justify having these in here for conservation purposes, or are they just there as exhibits?
If in the back is the real photography, it's about a real environment, it is very, very bad for the biodiversity.
Yes. Sadly or not, this isn't. This is a completely artificial one. All these photographs are from different places. They're not from the same water park. Same with the Jeep. They're all from different places. They're fictitious. But this is actually in Florida, and it's a completely artificial one. It's not an outside. These are not killer whales. They're not orca. Can't remember the genus, but they're relatives. But they're much smaller. But it's still a very, very small area for two animals like that to live in, and they're taught to do some very unnatural things. And it begs the question as to, you know, of course they weren't put on a hot plate that was heated up to make them do this, but, you know, who knows what things they had to endure.
And it's dangerous for the people because there's so many people to go.
There's a lot of people, lots of queues, there's lots of opportunity for injury. You have to really be very, very careful when you're running this type of activity. Good. Petting animals, well, you've got, this probably isn't that dangerous, but the risk of passing infection from her to the creature or from the shark to her is quite high. So how do you think about that? How do you deal with that?
Especially if the shark bites.
Especially if the shark bites, yes. I mean, you've got to think about the fingers. This is very true. Or maybe it's had its teeth pulled out so that it can't actually do any damage. That could happen. That could happen. Certainly this one has been, this particular skate, this is, has been, what's the word I'm looking for, modified. It's had its spike cut off the back of its tail, okay? And again, this isn't a really good practice to sort of foster. It's not normal for people to come into close contact with that sort of an animal.
And the child.
You know, and the child. So again, we've got lists of positives and negatives from this excursion. So I'm hoping that you've sort of got the idea of the general approach and why we do that sort of thing. If it's excursions that we're looking at, then you need to prioritise, whereas it's gone here, make a list of the most sensitive ones. Anything to do with animals or marine should be top of the list, really. Mountains are quite susceptible to big impacts because of the nature of what people do up the mountains, and particularly where waste's concerned. It takes a long time for waste to decompose at the top of a mountain because there's not much oxygen around. But people do go off track. It's very uncontrolled often in mountains. So you need to put things in a sort of order of priorities. There's lots of code of conducts, however, that you can use both with guides and customers and people putting the excursions together to make sure that they're developed in a sustainable way. And those are already available in Travelife. You don't need to reinvent the wheel.